and his delegation are about to arrive in Vietnam after a 60-hour marathon rail trip that's taken them across China. We have our Unification Ministry correspondent Oh Jung-hee joining us in the studio today, and as soon as we get live video of Kim Jong-un coming along, then Jung-hee, we're going to cut to the video and talk about what's happening. So this is the first fascinating step, hopefully, in what proves to be an intriguing and we hopefully get some tangible results this time around in Hanoi when Kim Jong-un and President Donald Trump meet from Wednesday and Thursday. It's not just going to be a one-day summit this time. It's going to be spread over 2 days. Before we get to the live footage, we are expecting to see him, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, get the full red carpet treatment when he arrives at this railway station, Dongdang Station in Liangson, which is a city on the border with China. It's in Vietnam. Just before we get, we can watch the live footage here, but it doesn't appear that anyone's arrived as of yet. We do know that some North Korean officials who were already in Vietnam doing the groundwork for this summit are already there to greet the North Korean leader and his delegation. We also are aware that security is extremely tight. We can see the bodyguards there to the right and left of your screen. They'll be heavily armed, wearing bulletproof vests, etc. Jung-hee, let's bring you in because we're going to be talking quite a lot over the next couple of days as you're going to be joining me in the studio, I'm very happy to say. But just for our listeners out there who might be wondering, Singapore was the first summit. Why exactly did they choose Vietnam as the summit venue this time around?
Well, of course, Kim Jong-un, the flying distance for Kim Jong-un was a very important factor. I mean, Kim Jong-un's personal jet, Changme-1, can only fly up to 4,000 or 5,000 kilometers. And Vietnam, in terms of flying distance, is only 2,700 kilometers away from North Korea. So, of course, both North Korea and the United States had to consider the flying distance factor. But other than that, Vietnam is also a country that's very close to both North Korea and the United States, having the embassies of both countries in Hanoi. But, you know, those two, they're also very important reasons, but other than these, besides these, what's another very good reason for North Korea and the U.S. to have their second summit in Vietnam is because Vietnam has a history of being a U.S. adversary and being transitioned into a very close economic partner. Actually, Vietnam and the U.S. fought in a Vietnam War. I mean, the United States dispatched its troops to Vietnam from 1964 up until 1975. The Vietnam War ended in 1975. And since then, Vietnam and the United States, they didn't have much of political relations until they signed, until they decided to normalize their relations in 1995. In 1995, and then in 5 years' time, in 2000, the United States and Vietnam signed a bilateral trade agreement, which also led to Vietnam's rapid economic growth, and that also coincided with Vietnam's own economic reform drive called Doi Moi economic reforms. So Vietnam was able to grow grow a lot in terms of trade, in terms of foreign direct investment, and the United States has mentioned a lot of times that North Korea could follow Vietnam's example. I mean, when Secretary Mike Pompeo visited Hanoi, visited Vietnam last year, he said North Korea could follow the path of Vietnam, and again mentioned that the U.S. is ready to provide a bright economic future for North Korea if it decides to denuclearize. So I'm guessing that all those factors had to play a role for both sides to determine Vietnam as the summit venue.
Well, you could argue almost that Vietnam has followed, maybe to a slightly less successful degree, the path that South Korea has, rising out of the ashes of war, of destitution, to become a relatively wealthy democracy in the region, where people are free to vote, free more or less to say what they want to say. There's political dissension. People can speak out against the leaders to a certain degree. We are looking at the station there, still no signs of activity. As soon as we see something, we will jump straight to it. How much progress, though, has there been since the summit in Singapore? President Trump, especially at home from the Democrats, has come under criticism for not really doing very much at all, apart from a bit of lip service with Kim Jong-un when he met with him back in June of last year in Singapore.
Well, it is. I mean, I think we can say that the negotiations between North Korea and the U.S. have been pretty much stalled up until like October or November last year. It is true that they've not been able to, carry on their negotiations as much as they wanted to, as much as they expected could be possible after the Singapore summit. But, Secretary Mike Pompeo visited North Korea in October, and he was able to meet Chairman Kim. And what he heard from Chairman Kim Jong-un was that North Korea was ready to invite experts over to verify the dismantlement of Punggye nuclear test site as well as Dongchangri missile engine test site. So those two things were the key promises that Secretary Mike Pompeo was able to hear from Chairman Kim. And after that, there were still discussions on how this sanctions relief should be, what should be done to these sanctions relief, but the two Koreas were still able to successfully carry on with their, joint railway and road projects, and that was the end of last year. And, come this year, as we got into 2019, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un made his New Year's address, and that actually provided another breakthrough to the stalled nuclear negotiations between North Korea and the U.S. So at this point, what we can expect from both sides, they've been mentioning a lot of times that they want to advance from the Singapore summit. At the Singapore summit, they promised they agreed on the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, but now they want to make a step forward, and they want to come up with some specific and concrete and substantive measures that the North Korean regime could take in terms of denuclearization.
Yeah, a wonderful analysis as always, Jung-hee. That's our Unification Ministry correspondent, Oh Jung-hee. We are still waiting for the delegation to arrive. Like we mentioned at the top of the newscast, Kim Jong-un and his delegation of high-level officials have been traveling by train for around 60 hours now, so you'd assume that they're all rather fatigued and might be eager to just get on the road and head into Hanoi so they can retire for a few hours, or at least start preparing for the big summit that starts tomorrow. It's going to be a 2 to 3 hour road trip from this station to Hanoi. They're going to clear the roads for security purposes, so they'll have a clear run down to Hanoi. As we wait for that, then, let's talk more about the summit, because it's going to be a jam-packed couple of days. You were going to say something. Yeah,
well, I mean, I just wanted to add a little bit on to why Kim Jong-un had to take this 60-hour-long tough journey from Pyongyang to, the Dongdang station in Hanoi, because it's 60 hours. I mean, if he were to take a plane from North Korea, then it would take like 3 hours and a half. Yeah. And he could, borrow a plane from China like he did before for the first summit in Singapore. But why did he choose train? Why did he have to choose a long and arduous journey of having to sit in a train for 60 hours? Well, there are some key reasons for that. I mean, the first one, I've talked to some experts about this, and what they say is that they couldn't actually trust North Korea leader's personal jet, Changme-1, because it's a very old, it's a very small aircraft. It's been used for decades. So they're saying that, the safety reasons are the most important factors here. I mean, if Kim Jong-un was to ride in a plane, if that actually led to an accident, then that would like be the worst case scenario, right? So that just can't happen. That's the first one. And the second one is that, how Chairman Kim had to cross through China to arrive in Vietnam. So in that process, some experts actually point out that North Korea is showing off its alliance with China once again. It's saying that, we are about to sit down with the U.S. president, but you know what? We have China as our friend, as our close ally. So that's another thing that Vietnam wanted to show off through this journey.
Well, we must forget that when you say Kim Jong-un was sitting on a train for 60 hours, We don't know for sure what exactly is inside his big armoured train, but we can probably guess that he has a nice big bed, plenty of entertainment and whatnot. That's not to say that such a long journey is going to take it out of you regardless. And like you say, the safety aspect is something that has to be considered, because not only is it Kim Jong-un traveling, it's the entirety of the elite, the most powerful people in North Korea, including his sister, top aides, top generals, etc.
That's right. I mean, Kim Jong-un, if he sits in the train, because he's the supreme leader of the country, he will be able to enjoy a lot of good services. He'll have a nice bed, he'll have a very good bathroom of his own, he'll have all these desks, best food. But you know what? Other people in his delegation, can we make sure that they are able to enjoy the same services? No. Right. I mean, I've talked to some experts about this, and the 60-hour journey, it'll be the most comfortable one for Kim Jong-un, but not really for other people in the train. So, I mean, there must have been some really good reasons why Kim Jong-un had to choose this train. Another reason some experts point out is his grandfather. I mean, you know, the founder of the regime. He chose to, when he visited, he's called Kim Il-sung, and when he went to Vietnam in 1958 and 1964, he took a train and then he took a plane to arrive in Vietnam. So that's another case that Kim Jong-un maybe wanted to follow.
Okay, we are hearing word that the train might be arriving very shortly. So as soon as we see that, it's going to be remarkable scenes as the North Korean leader gets off the train, stretches his legs and says hello to everyone there at the station. He is getting, as you'd imagine, the red carpet treatment from the Vietnamese government. We hear as well, Jung-hee, that Kim and his team have plans not only to meet with US President Donald Trump on Wednesday, but also the leaders of Vietnam.
That is true. We are hearing that Kim Jong-un is planning to meet the Vietnamese president, and there is also a high possibility for Kim to sit down with the prime minister of the country as well as the National Assembly chairwoman. And there is also a possibility that Kim Jong-un could take a tour around some economic facilities in Vietnam, such as Haiphong, the industrial port town, or maybe Bac Ninh, where South Korea's Samsung Electronics also has a smartphone factory in.
Yeah, we heard a couple of weeks ago how one of the North Korean officials currently in Vietnam was apparently doing a bit of a vehicle tour around Samsung's facilities in Vietnam, perhaps taking a look at the South Korean tech giants' activities in the Southeast Asian country. They produce an awful lot of the things that go into Samsung smartphones, TVs and other electrical equipment in Vietnam. Slightly cheaper labor over there. We are hearing that the train has pulled into the station. We can see it there in the back of your screen, the armoured iron-clad, perhaps titanium-clad train that is Kim Jong-un's. Jung-hee, anything you'd like to add at this point?
Well, yeah, that is the special train that we saw a lot of times. That train Kim Jong-un has taken to his visits to China as well. And, you know, just yesterday, North Korea's Korean Central TV as well released the footage of Kim Jong-un and his delegation getting into the special train. And that green train is the heavily fortified train that we saw on North Korean television. From that train, Kim Jong-un and plus his entourage, including the regime's foreign minister and plus some top nuclear negotiators, including Kim Young-chul, Choi Sun-hee, some other people also in charge of economy could also get out. He's got some 8 close aides traveling with him to Vietnam.
If you can just give us a rundown then of some of the top officials that are with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. We don't know exactly the schedule for the summit in Singapore. The US officials, the counterparts, sat across from each other during parts of the summit. Whether that happens this time in Hanoi remains to be seen, but we do know that the North Korean foreign minister, the chairman of the Central Committee there in the north, as well as the chairman of the Supreme People's Assembly Budget Committee. They're all there as well, including the defense minister. So can you tell us a bit more about this delegation as we wait for North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to depart from the train?
Well, sure. I mean, two people that I have to mention are Kim Yong-chol and Choi Sun-hee. These are some top nuclear negotiators who've been deeply involved in denuclearization talks with the United States. I mean, Kim Yong-chol has visited the United States for high-level talks with Secretary Mike Pompeo and has also met with U.S. President Donald Trump. Other than these people, I have to say Lee Soo-yong, who's the head of the North Korean ruling party's International Affairs Department. He's known as the diplomacy expert in North Korea. And plus, there is Ri Yong-ho, who's the regime's foreign minister. And other than them, there's, of course, Kim Yo-jong, who's the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un's sister, and at the same time, a very close aide. We've been able to see her a lot of times at every summit that Kim Jong-un had, especially at the September summit in Pyongyang. Other than them, we've got a defense minister, Ro Kwang-chol. We've got Kim Pyong-hae, who's in charge of, personnel management. And other than these, one person we have to especially note is Oh Soo-yong, who's the chairman of the North Korean Parliament's Budget Committee. I mean, we know that this person used to be North Korea's minister in charge of electronics and the vice minister in charge of manufacturing. So,
well, he's the guy that a lot of people refer to as North Korea's man in charge of the economy. So it's going to be very interesting to see, especially as President Trump keeps on mentioning that he says, North Korea, if you abandon your nuclear weapons and come to the table and become a regular nation again, you have a fantastic, fabulous economic future laying ahead of you.
Yes, that is true. And of course, because North Korea and the U.S. are anyways visiting Vietnam, the exemplary economic development case for North Korea, we're expecting that this person could also accompany Kim Jong-un to some of the economic facilities that he might tour. Like, for example, we're hearing that Kim Jong-un could visit Bac Ninh province, he could visit, Haiphong, he could visit Ha Long Bay, which are all related to, industrial facilities, economic reform, plus boosting the tourism industries. And all these could have to do with Oh Soo-yong being there and telling Kim Jong-un in what parts, North Korean regime will have to improve.
Okay, we are looking at the screen there, what appears to be the limousine that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will take for this road trip from that train station on the Vietnam-China border to Hanoi. It looks as though he might be getting straight into his vehicle, walking up that short red carpet there. Only looks to be about 50 to 100 meters long. I'm sure he'll give some brief pleasantries to the gathered officials there, but perhaps he does want to get on to the road. As Jung-hee said, there has been some speculation that he might take one or two stops on his way down to Hanoi, but absolutely nothing has been confirmed as of now. As I mentioned before, we can see the security, the very heavy security we first witnessed in real time for the first time when there was the first summit between Kim Jong-un and South Korean President Moon Jae-in. We'll await to see how long they can run alongside that vehicle as the limousine prepares to make its way out of the station. We are still awaiting the appearance of Kim Jong-un. Perhaps he's just getting his things in order. The delegation is making sure they're all going to come out in the correct order.
I mean, the Vietnamese officials were getting ready for this welcoming ceremony. They put a lot of efforts in this. I mean, I even heard that the Vietnamese officials actually had a fake Kim Jong-un model, like standing, at that Dong Dang station over there, and they practiced a lot for this welcoming ceremony. I mean, they've been, having the red carpet, they've been cleaning up, but the most interesting part that I heard was that they had a fake Kim Jong-un, standing there to have the best welcoming ceremony.
Yes, you can never be too careful with such an important person, and Vietnam will be very cautious to make sure not only Kim Jong-un but President Trump have a safe stay, and a comfortable one, in Vietnam for the duration of the next couple of days. It's hard to overstate how important this summit is for North Korea, the US, South Korea, and the world, but especially for Vietnam, because the eyes of the world are on how well they have prepared for this summit between the most powerful man in the world and Kim Jong-un, a man we knew very little about until a few years ago. It appears the door has been lined up with the red carpet now, a bit of manoeuvring going on. Perhaps we'll see the door open soon, and then we can continue our discussion on what happens next.
Well, one thing I want to add is that this is the first time for a North Korean leader to visit Vietnam in over 50 years. I mean, the previous time that a North Korean leader has visited Vietnam is in 1958 and in 1964. Okay, we're seeing North Korean leader's sister Kim Yo-jong coming out of the train. She is a very close aide to North Korean leader. She's getting back in.
She got
the
back
train.
in the train. Yeah.
I guess she's getting ready for this welcoming ceremony as well.
Yeah. So we are expecting North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to step off that train in a couple of minutes' time. High stakes summit. We are all hoping that the two leaders, the President of the United States and the Chairman of North Korea, can really hammer out something tangible, something that is going to get the denuclearization process back on track. And hopefully there is talk about the potential for some declaration to end the Korean War. That truly would be remarkable as well. We await to see Kim Jong-un. The last time we saw him in public, Jung-hee, would have been a few months ago, really, apart from some still photos or some propaganda videos out of North Korea's. And here we see now, Kim Jong-un is departing from the train wearing his traditional black suit there. He is making his way. It's a touch dark right now, but he's going to shake hands with the North Korean officials who have been already locked in negotiations about drawing up a declaration that will come out after this summit. So let's keep our eye on the video, shall we, Jung-hee?
Yes, and there we see top North Korean officials lined up to come out after North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-un just received a,
bouquet.
Received some flowers from the Vietnamese officials, and there we see North Korea's top nuclear negotiator Kim Young-chol, who met with Secretary Pompeo several times. And I'm also seeing Lee Soo-yong, who's the head of the ruling party's International Affairs Department. I've just mentioned that he's a diplomacy expert in North Korea.
Well, it is a who's who of the North Korean leadership, as you would expect for a summit of this magnitude. We will see them walk up the red carpet. Kim Jong-un looking rather fresh. He doesn't look like a man who's taken a 2.5-day train visit. So perhaps we were correct in our assumption that he's been eating well and resting well during his journey. And yes, he's meeting and shaking hands with everyone. Security very, very tight, of course, as Kim Jong-un makes his way towards his armored limousine as well, something similar to the Beast, which the US president will presumably take when he arrives in Hanoi. He's set to arrive late on Tuesday. He is taking Air Force One, different mode of transportation for President Trump.
And some Vietnamese citizens welcoming the North Korean leader.
Yeah, there's a bit of a scrum going on with cameramen trying to jostle for the best position to get the best image of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. But we can see him much clearer now that he stepped out of the station. We can see his generals behind him, his mini army of bodyguards ready to protect him. And so he's getting straight into his limousine, where he will be driving to Hanoi, to his hotel, try and get a bit of rest before the next 2 days, which promise to be a couple of days packed with diplomacy. And Jung-hee, like you say, this really is a proud day for the people of Vietnam as well. North Korea and Vietnam share a great many things in common, including their political ideologies, of course.
Yeah, of course. I mean, another reason why Vietnam was chosen as the summit venue was because it's not only because of the rapid economic growth that Vietnam achieved, but it's also because Vietnam has maintained its Communist Party in terms of achieving a free market economy. So, yeah, I mean, what North Korea wants is to keep its communist regime. And in terms of that, Vietnam is a very good exemplary case. And Vietnam and North Korea actually had a lot of ups and downs in terms of their diplomatic relations since 1950s. And also, I mean, in 2017? I mean, North Korean leader's half-brother, in terms of an alleged killing of his half-brother, it appeared that a Vietnamese woman is involved, and that's when the relations between the two countries actually went to the lowest level. But it's restored again. North Korea's foreign minister has visited Vietnam to learn from the economic development model, and here we're seeing Kim Jong-un and his delegation to see Vietnam, and possibly, it's about 2-hour or 3-hour drive to Hanoi, and on this way, nothing's for sure, but Kim Jong-un could visit some of, some facilities, industrial facilities in the country.
And as we mentioned, the trip will take a couple of hours, and Hanoi is starting the process as well of going into lockdown, as it will stay that way for the next 2 days as Kim Jong-un and President Trump stay in the Vietnamese capital. The entire city will be on lockdown for the duration of their trip until they safely leave Hanoi. We are seeing Chairman Kim's vehicle leave the station now. He is being ushered along by his team of bodyguards there. We'll see how long they keep up the chase. No, it appears they are going to jump into another vehicle and follow the North Korean leader as he makes his way to Hanoi. Well, that was quite something, wasn't it, Jung-hee?
Yes,
the first part of what promises to be an extremely busy day for us here in the Arirang newsroom. Do stay with us, of course, for the duration of the next 2 days. It promises to be remarkable, and hopefully we'll get some concrete and meaningful outcomes out of this summit. It's always a pleasure having you in the studio, Jung-hee. You already know that anyway.
Oh, thank you.
I'm sure I'll be speaking to you plenty over the next couple of days, and thank you ever so much for coming into the studio at short notice. We do appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome.
So, as we just saw there, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is now in Vietnam, a day ahead of his summit with US President Donald Trump. Kim's train just arrived at that train station, Dong Đang Station in Lang Son, which is a city on the border with China. Let's get some more information from our Park Hee-jun, who's standing by at the hotel in Hanoi, where Kim Jong-un will be staying. Hee-jun.
Right, Mark. So we know that Kim Jong-un is going to head to this hotel to Hanoi through car from the border station. Now, traffic has been banned on the road that Kim Jong-un is going to use to get to the capital. So it should take about 2 to 3 hours to get to the Vietnamese capital of Hanoi. Now, Jung-hee pretty much mentioned everything, but right now it's unclear whether he will come straight to Melia Hotel or if he's going to make some stops along the way. He could visit Haiphong, an economic powerhouse that's home to VinFast, Vietnam's first automobile brand. The port city is also where some South Korean factories, including LG Electronics, are based. Now, other possible stops are Halong Bay, a popular tourist destination, and Phang Nguyen Province, which has a Samsung Electronics smartphone factory. But then again, he could visit any of these places after the summit. And we're informed that Kim and Trump will finally meet tomorrow for a one-on-one. They'll have a brief meeting followed by a social dinner where the two leaders will be joined by two of their aides. And State Secretary Mike Pompeo will also be joined.
Okay, Hee-Jun, we're just digesting what we just saw, but we originally believed that the Melia Hotel would be used as the White House press center. So will the American press be staying with Kim Jong-un under the same roof?
Right, but Mark, this is just in. It turns out the White House is going to move its press center to the International Media Press Center. So they're not going to be under the same roof. Kim Jong-un will have this venue to himself, and he'll be able to avoid the American press.
Well, that makes sense. I guess he doesn't want to be answering questions from any CNN or CBS reporters or the like. Just tell us more about the atmosphere you're seeing there in Hanoi. It looks bustling right now, but I suppose all those vehicles and cars and motorcycles will be cleared out of the way within the next couple of hours.
Right, you can probably see from behind me, but it's really chaotic here. There are so many people and security is as tight as it can be. Now, they're not letting us inside the perimeter. Relevant authorities have been preparing day and night for Kim's arrival. And throughout the night, police have been setting up barricades around the hotel and in the streets that Kim will be using to get to the hotel. Melia Hotel is also swarming with press standing by in the rain, including myself, all just waiting to see the North Korean leader and his delegation. But I don't see much movement from the North Korean bodyguards who are staying at this hotel for days, but I'll keep a watch on that, Mark.
Okay, thank you very much, Hee-Jun. That was our Park Hee-Jun, one of our 3 reporters in Hanoi for the North Korea-U.S. summit. We very much look forward to connecting to our Park Hee-Jun and our other reporters there in the Vietnamese capital during our next newscast. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump is also on his way to Hanoi. He's taking Air Force One and is set to arrive late Tuesday local time. Vietnam's foreign ministry said on Monday that President Trump's plane will be arriving at Hanoi's main international airport at 8:30 p.m. tonight. The ministry added that President Trump is going to meet with his Vietnamese counterpart as well as the Prime Minister of Vietnam on Wednesday morning. President Trump, as we just heard, is scheduled to meet with Kim Jong-un on Wednesday and Thursday, and the details of that should be coming out in full rather shortly. South Korea's foreign minister has expressed guarded optimism that North Korea could agree to something beyond the dismantlement of its main nuclear complex during the Hanoi summit. Speaking to Seoul-based Yonhap news agency in Geneva on Monday, Kang Kyung-hwa also called for the North to take concrete steps towards its disarmament if it wants to secure corresponding measures from the US, noting that US nuclear envoy Stephen Biegun had extensive consultations with the North during his recent trip to Pyongyang. Kang also expressed her expectations for meaningful results from this week's summit. As the second North Korea-U.S. summit edges ever and ever closer, a key question is whether the two leaders will make a small deal or a big deal. The Trump administration has, thus far, been coy on what concessions it might be willing to offer, but both sides will be eager to put some meat on the bones after what many considered was quite an underwhelming first summit in Singapore. Hong Yu reports.
8 months have passed since the first meeting between the leaders of North Korea and the U.S. And what these two leaders are willing to yield in the second North Korea-U.S. summit is becoming a matter of pressing concern. For the past months, they have been playing the tug-of-war on the denuclearization of North Korea and what the U.S. will give in return. Last June, the U.S. requested preemptive measures for denuclearization, including reporting nuclear weapons and related facilities. And in return, North Korea requested the lifting of sanctions and a declaration of the end of the Korean War. Because the two were not ready to put on the table everything that the other side wanted, they could not avoid reaching a deadlock. They are likely to make some kind of deal at the summit this week, but the question is whether it'll be a big deal or a small deal. The result that experts might consider a small deal is one that just continues the current momentum of working towards denuclearization. That means a vague plan to get rid of the Yongbyon nuclear facility in North Korea, open a joint liaison office, and provide humanitarian aid. A big deal would be North Korea providing a detailed roadmap to denuclearization. This could include a schedule for the dismantling of the Yongbyon nuclear facility, along with verification by international inspectors. In return, the U.S. will have to lift some sanctions, such as allowing import of oil. But experts say that such a deal will be hard to make.
North Korea is only offering to give up Yongbyon without any specifics of how the US can verify whether it's been dismantled or not. So if North Korea does not offer something more and instead stands its ground, the US will probably only offer humanitarian aid, creating a joint liaison office, maybe allowing the reopening of Kumgangsan mountain tours, and partially lifting sanctions for inter-Korean economic cooperation.
Hong-yu, Arirang News.
Now, it goes without saying that Vietnam and the US were mortal enemies during the Vietnam War. In the decades that have passed since that dreadfully bloody conflict, the two countries have restored diplomatic ties, share a friendly relationship and cooperate in a whole host of fields. Lee Min-sun reports.
The most important event in the history of U.S.-Vietnam relations is the Vietnam War, which lasted from 1960 to 1975. The U.S. first established diplomatic relations with Vietnam in 1950, when Vietnam gained limited independence from France. But those ties were cut following the end of the Vietnam War, and that rupture of diplomatic relations lasted 20 years. The Vietnamese government had made steady efforts to create the conditions for the normalization of relations with the U.S., such as cooperating with issues involving prisoners of war and those missing in action. In 1995, the U.S. announced the formal normalization of diplomatic relations with Vietnam.
One of the reasons why Vietnam is important to the US is that it's both linked to Southeast Asia and borders with China. To balance power with China, for the US, it was important to have Vietnam on their side.
Since then, the two countries signed a trade treaty in 2000, and the top leaders of both countries visited each other and promised to build a cooperative relationship that looks toward the future. The two countries have continued to strengthen their cooperation in economic, military, labor, and humanitarian issues through regular dialogue and high-level personal exchanges.
Considering that the Vietnamese economy grew after the normalization of relations with the US, and that's what North Korea ultimately wants in the end, holding the summit in Vietnam could have a symbolic meaning for North Korea as well.
Lee Min-sun, Arirang News.
Well, that's where we're going to leave the news for now. Do stay tuned to us here on Arirang TV. We'll have our next newscast coming up at noon Korea time with our very own Lee Ji-yoon. Just a reminder that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has arrived in Vietnam and is making his way to the capital, Hanoi, ahead of the North Korea-U.S. summit that's going to happen over the next 2 days in the Vietnamese capital. Much more on that at noon. Until then, goodbye.